We are back for our chapter 4 of Book Think and Grow Rich by Robert T. Kiyosaki. Lesson 4: The History of Taxes and the Power of Corporations. My rich dad just played the game smart and he did it through corporation, the biggest secret of the rich. I remember in school being told the story of Robin Hood and his merry men. My teacher thought it was a wonderful story of a romantic hero who robbed from the rich and gave to the poor. My rich dad did not see Robin Hood as a hero, he called Robin Hood a crook. Robin Hood may be long gone, but his followers live on. I often still hear people say, why don't the rich pay for it? Or the rich should pay more in taxes and give it to the poor. It is this Robin Hood fantasy of taking from the rich to give the poor that has caused the most pain for the poor and the middle class. The reason for the middle class is so heavily taxed because the Robin Hood idol. The reality is that the rich are not taxed. It's the middle class, especially the educated upper income middle class, who pays for the poor. Again, to understand fully how things happen, we need to look at the history of taxes. Although my highly educated dad was an expert of the history of education, my rich dad fashioned himself as an expert on the history of taxes. Rich dad explained to Mike and me that originally in England and America there were no taxes. Occasionally there were temporary taxes levied in order to pay for wars. The king or the president would put the word out and ask everyone to chip in. Taxes were levied in Britain for the fight against Napoleon from 1799 to 1816, and in America to pay for the Civil War from 1861 to 1865. In 1874, England made income tax a permanent levy on its citizens. In 1913, an income tax became permanent in the US with the adoption of the 16th Amendment to the US Constitution. At one time, Americans were anti taxed. It had been the tax on tea that led to the famous Tea Party in Boston Harbor, an incident that helped ignite the Revolutionary War. It took approximately 50 years in both England and US to sell the idea of a regular income tax. What these historical dates fail to reveal is that both of these taxes were initially levied against only the rich. It was this point that Rich Dad wanted Mike and me to understand. He explained that the idea of taxes was made popular and accepted by the majority by telling the poor and the middle class that taxes were created only to punish the rich. This is how the masses voted for the law, and it became constitutionally legal. Although it was intended to punish the rich, in reality it would up finishing the very people who voted for it, the poor and the middle class. Once government got a taste of money in, appetite grew, said Rich Dad. Your dad and I exactly opposite. Your dad and I are exactly opposite. He is a government bureaucrat and I am a capitalist. We get paid and our success is measured on opposite behaviors. He gets paid to spend money and hire people. The more he spends and the people more people he hires, the larger his organization becomes. In the government, a large organization is a respected organization. On the other hand, within my organization, the fewer people I hire, the less money I spend, the more I am respected by my investors. That's why I don't like government people. They have different objectives than most business people. As the government grows more and more, tax dollars are needed to support it. My educated dad sincerely believed that government should help people. He loved John F. Kennedy and especially the idea of the Peace Corps. He loved the idea so much that both and my mom worked for both he and my Mom worked for the Peace Corps training volunteer to go to Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines. He always strived for additional grants and budgets increases so he could hire more people both in his job with the education department in the Peace Corps. From the time I was about 10 years old, I would hear from my rich dad that government workers were a pack of lazy thieves, and from my poor dad, I would hear how the rich were greedy crooks who should be made to pay more taxes. Both sides had valid points. It was difficult to go to work for one of the biggest capitalists in town and come home to a father who was a prominent. My rich dad did not see Robin Hood as a hero, he called Robin Hood a crook. Prominent government leader. It was not easy to know which dad to believe, yet, when you study the history of taxes, an interesting respective perspective emerges. As I said, the passage of taxes was only possible because the masses believed in the Robin Hood theory of economics take from the rich and give to everyone else. The problem was that the government's appetite for money was so great that taxes soon needed to be levied on the middle class. From there, it kept trickling down. However, the rich saw an opportunity because they don't play by the same set of rules. The rich knew about corporations which became popular in the days of sailing ships. The rich created the corporation as a vehicle to limit their risk to the assets of each voyage. The rich put their money into corporation to finance the voyage. The corporation would then hire a crew to sail to the new world to look for treasure. If the ship was lost, the crew lost their lives, but the loss to the rich would be limited only to the money they invested for that particular voyage. Fast forward 25 years, taxes and tax incentives. We continue to see government use the tax laws to provide incentives to business owners and investors to create job and housing as well as other work the government needs done. These incentives reduce the taxes of the rich and this pushes the government to drive tax revenue from the middle class. The diagram that follows shows how the corporate structure sits outside your personal income statement and balance sheet. Corporation income statement, personal income statement. एसेट से आया इनकम में इनकम से जाया एक्सपेंसेस और फिर इनकम एक्सपेंसेस. It is the knowledge of legal corporate structure that really gives the rich a vast advantage over the poor and the middle class. Having two fathers teaching me, one a socialist and the other a capitalist, I quickly began to realize that the philosophy of the capitalist made more financially sense to me. It seemed to me that the socialists ultimately penalized themselves due to their lack of financial education. No matter what the take from the rich crowd come up with, the rich always found a way to outsmart them. That is how taxes were eventually levied on the middle class. The rich outsmarted the intellectuals solely because they understood the power of money. Subject not taught in school. How did the rich outsmart the intellectuals? Once the take from the rich tax was passed, cash started flowing into government officials. Initially, people were happy money was handed out to government workers with the rich government workers and the rich. It went to government of workers in the form of jobs and pensions, and it went to rich via their factories receiving government contracts. The government received a large pool of money, but the problem was the fiscal management of that money. The government ideal is to avoid having excess money. If you fail to spend your allotted funds, you risk losing it in the next budget. You would certainly not be recognized for being efficient. Business people, on the other hand, are rewarded for having excess money and applied it for their efficiency. As the cycle of growing government spending continued, the demand for money increased, and the tax the rich idea was adjusted to include lower income level down to very people who voted in it, the middle and the poor class. True capitalists used their financial knowledge to simply find an escape. They headed back to the protection of a corporation. But what many people who have never formed a corporation don't know is that a corporation is really a thing. A corporation is merely a file folder with some legal documents in it, sitting in some attorney's office and registered with a state government agency. It is not a big building or a factory or a group of people. A corporation is merely a legal document that creates a legal body without a soul. Using it, the wealth of the rich was once again protected. It was popular because the income tax rate of a corporation is less than the individual income tax rates. In addition, certain expenses could be paid by a corporation with pre-tax dollar. This war between the haves and have-nots has racked 400 of years. The battle is waged whenever and wherever laws are made, and it will go on forever. The problem is that the money who lose are the uninformed, the one who gets up every day and diligently go to work and pay taxes. If they only understood the way the rich play the game, they could play it too. Then they would be on their way to their financial independence. This is why I cringe every time I hear a parent advise their children to go to school so they can find a safe and secure job. An employee with a safe, secure job without financial aptitude has no escape. Average Americans today work 4 to 5 months for the government just to cover their taxes. In my opinion, that is simply too long. The harder you work, the more you pay the government. That is why I believe the idea of take from the rich backfired on the very people who voted in it. Every time people try to punish the rich don't simply comply, they react. They have the money, power, and intent to change things. They don't just sit there and voluntarily pay more taxes. Instead, they search for ways to minimize their tax burden. They hire smart attorneys and accountants and persuade politicians to change laws or create legal loopholes. They use their resources to effect changes. The tax code of the US also allows other ways to reduce taxes. Most of these vehicles are available to anyone, but it is the rich who find them because they are minding their own business. For example, 1031 is jargon for Section 1031 of Internal Revenue Code, which allows a seller to delay paying taxes on a piece of real estate that is sold for a capital gain through an exchange for a more expensive piece of real estate. Real estate is one investment vehicle that has a legal that has a great tax advantage. As long as you keep trading up in value, you will not be taxed on the gains until you liquidate. People who don't take advantage of these legal tax saving are missing an opportunity to build their asset. The poor and the middle don't have the same resources. They sit there and let the government needles enter their arm and allow the blood donation to begin. Still true today. The taxman will take as much as you let him. The tax system is ultimately fair in that it works the same for everyone who has the same situation. If you are willing to invest, the tax laws will work in your favor. If you want to just spend and buy liabilities, the tax law won't give you any break, and it's likely you will pay the most tax possible. Today I am constantly shocked at the number of people who pay more taxes or take fewer deductions simply because they are afraid of the government. I have friends who have had their business shut down and destroyed only to find out it was a mistake on the part of the government. I realize all that, but the price of working from January to May is a high price to pay for that intimidation. My poor dad never fought back. My rich dad didn't either. He just played the game smart, and he did it through corporation, the biggest secret of the rich. You may remember the first lesson I learned from my rich dad. I was a little boy of 9 who had to sit and wait for him to choose to talk to me. I sat in his office waiting for him to get to me. He was ignoring me on purpose. He wanted me to recognize his power and to desire to that power for myself one day. During all years I studied and learned from him. He always reminded me that knowledge is power, and with the money comes great power that requires the right knowledge to keep it and make it multiply. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and control it. Without that knowledge, the world pushes you around. Rich Dad constantly reminded Mike and me that the biggest bully was not the boss or the supervisor, but the taxman. The taxman will always make more if you let him. The first lesson of having money work for you as opposed to you working for money is all about power. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and control it. Once we had this knowledge of power of money working for us, he wanted us to be financially smart and not let anyone or anything push us around. If you are ignorant, it's easy to be bullied. If you know what you are talking about, you have a fighting chance. That is why he paid so much for smart tax accountants and attorneys. It was less expensive to pay them than to pay the government. His best lesson to me was be smart and you won't be pushed around much. He knew the law because he was a law abiding citizen, and it was expensive not to not know the law. Not know the law. If you know you are right, you are not afraid of fighting back. Even if you are taken on Robin Hood and his band of merry men. My highly educated dad always encouraged me to land a good job with a strong corporation. He spoke of the virtues of working your way up the corporate ladder. He didn't understand that by relying solely on a paycheck from a corporate employer, I would be a docile cow ready for milking. Each dollar in my asset column was a great employee working hard to make more employees and buy the boss a new Porsche. When I told my rich dad of my father's advice, he only chuckled. Why not on the ladder? Was all he said. As a young boy, I did not understand what rich dad meant by owning my own corporation. It was an idea that seemed impossible and intimidating. Although I was excited by the idea, as a young boy, I didn't understand that rich dad meant by owning my own corporation. It was an idea that seemed impossible and intimidating. Although I was excited by the idea, and my inexperience wouldn't let me envision the possibility that grown ups would someday work for a company I would own. The point is that if not for my rich dad, I would have probably followed my educated dad's advice. It was merely the occasional reminder of my rich dad that keeps the idea of owning my own corporation alive and kept me on a different path. By the time I was 15 or 16, I knew I wasn't going to continue down the path my educated dad recommended. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was determined not to head in the direction most of my classmates were heading. That decision changed my life. Timeless rich dad wisdom on the ladder. As technology continues to change the way we work and do business, I talk. with more and more people who ask themselves, how can I own the ladder? Capitalism is thriving, and the free market system means that entrepreneurs who can offer a better product at a better price have a good chance of success. It was not until my mid 20s that my rich dad's advice began to make more sense to me. I was just out of the Marine Corps and working for Xerox. I was making a lot of money, but every time I looked at my paycheck, I was disappointed. The deductions was so large, and the more I worked, the greater they become. As I became more successful, my bosses talked about the promotion and raises. I was flattering, but I could hear my rich dads asking in my ear, "Who are you working for? Who are you making rich?" In 1974, while still an employee for Xerox, I formed my first corporation and began minding my own business. There were already a few assets in my asset column, but now I was determined to focus on making it bigger. Those paychecks with all deductions made all the years of my rich dad's advice makes total sense. I could see the future if I followed my educated dad's advice. Many employers feel that advising their workers to mind their own business is bad for business, but for me, focusing on my own business and developing assets made me a better employee because I now had a purpose. I come in early and worked diligently, amazing as much money as possible so I could invest in real estate. How I was just set to boom, and there were fortunes to be made. The more I realized that we were in beginning stages of a boom, the more Xerox machine I sold. The more I sold, the more money I made off, and of course, the more deductions came out of my paycheck. It was inspiring. I wanted out of the employee trap paycheck. It was inspiring. I wanted out of the employee trap by so badly that I worked even harder so I could invest more. By 1978, I was consistently one of the top 5 salespeople at the company. I badly wanted out of the rat race. In less than 3 years, I was making more in my real estate holding corporation than I was making at Xerox, and the money I was making in my asset column is my own corporation was money working for me, not me pounding on doors selling copies. My rich dad's advice made much more sense. Soon the cash flow from my properties was so strong that my company brought me my first Porsche. My fellow Xerox salesman thought I was spending my commissions. I wasn't. I was investing my commissions in assets. My money was working hard to make more money. Each dollar in my asset column was a great employee working hard to make more employees and buy the boss a new Porsche with the before tax dollar. I began to work harder for Xerox. The plan was working and my Porsche was the proof. By using the lesson I learned from my rich dad, and I was able to get out of the proverbial rat race at an early age. It was made possible because of the strong financial knowledge I had acquired through rich dad's lesson. Without this financial knowledge, which I call financial intelligence for or financial IQ, my road to financial independence would have been much more difficult. I now teach others in the hope that I may share my knowledge with them. I remind people that financial IQ is made up of knowledge from four broad areas of expertise. Accounting is financial literate or the ability to read numbers. This is a vital skill if you want to build an empire. The more money you are responsible for, the more accuracy is required, or the house comes tumbling down. This is the left brain side or the details. Financial literacy is the ability to read and understand financial statement, which allows you to identify the strengths and weakness of any business. Investing is the science of making money. This involves strategies and formulas that use the creative right brain side. Understanding market is the science of supply and demand. You need to know the technical aspects of the market, which are emotion driven in addition to fundamental or economic aspects. Aspects of an investment. Does an investment make sense, or does it make sense based on current market condition? The law corporation wrapped around the technical sales of accounting, investing, and market can contribute to the explosive growth. A person who understands the tax advantage and protection provided by a corporation can get rich so much faster than someone who is an employer or a small business sole proprietor. It's the It's like the difference between someone walking and someone flying. The difference is profound when it comes to long term wealth. Tax advantages: a corporation can do many things that an employee cannot, like pay expenses before paying taxes. This is a whole area of expertise that is very exciting. Employees earn and get taxed, and they try to live on what is left. A corporation earns, spends everything it can, and it is taxed on anything that is left. It's one of the biggest legal tax loopholes that the rich use. They are easy to set up and are not expensive if you own investments that are producing good cash flow. For example, by owning your own corporation, your vacations can be board meeting in Hawaii, car payment, insurance repair, and health club memberships are company expenses. Most restaurant meals are partial expensive and on, but it's done legally with the pre-tax dollar. Protection from lawsuits. We live in a litigious society. Everybody wants a piece of your action. The rich hide much of their wealth using vehicles such as corporation and trust to protect their assets from creditors. When someone sues a wealthy individual, they are often met with layers of legal protection and often find that the wealthy person actually owns nothing. They control everything but own nothing. The poor and middle class try to own everything and lose it to the government or to fellow citizens who like to shoot the rich. They learn it from the Robin Hood story: take from the rich and give it to the poor. It is not the purpose of this book to go into specifics of owning a corporation, but I will say that if you own any kind of legitimate asset, I would consider finding out more about the benefits and protection offered by a corporation as soon as possible. There are many books written on the subject that will detail the benefits and even walk with the through the steps and necessary to set up a corporation. Garrett Sutton's books on corporation provide wonderful insight into the power of personal corporation. Sorry. Financial IQ is actually the synergy of many skills and talents. I would say it is a combination of the four technical skills listed above that make up basic financial intelligence. If you aspire to great wealth, it is the combination of these skills that will greatly amplify your financial intelligence. In summary, business owners with corporation earn, spend, pay taxes. Employees who work for corporation earn, pay taxes, spend. As part of your overall financial strategy, I recommend that you learn about the protection that legal entities can provide for business and tax assets. Study session chapter 4 lesson 4: the history of taxes and the power of corporation. Chapter 4: the history of taxes and power of corporation. Chapter summary: many people see Robin Hood as a hero, taking from the rich and giving to the poor. Rich Dad did not share that opinion. He called Robin Hood a crook. Through the popular sentiment is that the rich should pay more in taxes and give to the poor. In reality, it is the middle class that is heavily taxed, especially the educated upper middle class, middlemen. To understand how this happens, gives a brief history of taxes in England and America. Originally, there were no taxes. Only occasionally temporary leaves to pay for such things as wars. In 1874, England made income tax a permanent levy on its citizens. In America, the land were a tax on tea led to the Boston Tea Party poster and helped ignite the Revolutionary War. The adoption of the 16th Amendment in 1913 made an income tax permanent. These countries were able to get tax accepted by the majority because they were first levied only against the rich. However, although income tax was designed to punish the rich, it would up pushing punishing those who have voted for it, the poor and the middle class. Rich Dad explained that he and Poor Dad were opposite. Poor Dad, as a government employee, was rewarded if he spent money and hired people and making his organization. making his organization larger. But for rich dad, the fewer people he hired, the less money he spent, the more he was respected by his investors. And as the government grows, so does the amount of tax dollar needed to support it. Poor had sincerely believed that the government should help people. He and Robert's mom worked for Peace Corps, training volunteers to go to Malaysia, Thailand, and the Philippines. They were always seeking more grants and budgets increase so they could hire more people. For Robert, it was a challenge to work for one of the biggest capitalists in town and go home to a prominent government leader. It wasn't easy to know which dad to believe. But over time, Robert studied the history of taxes. He saw an interesting perspective as the government's appetite for money grew. Taxes soon needed to be levied on the middle class, and from there it kept trickling down. But the rich saw an opportunity because they don't play by the same set of rule. Corporation which became popular in the days of sailing ships offered a way around taxes. Understanding the legal corporate structure gave the rich a steep advantage and allowed them to outsmart the intellectuals. The government idol is to avoid having excess money. If you fail to spend your allotted funds, you risk losing it in the next budget. Business people, on the other hand, are rewarded for having excess money and are applauded for their efficiency. And as the government continued its ideal and spent more and more money, more taxes, this time on the middle class and eventually the poor were needed. A corporation is simply a legal documentation that creates a legal entity. It is not really a thing, not a factory or a group of people. But it offers a lower income tax rate than individual have, and certain expenses can be paid by a corporation with the pre-tax dollar. Pre-tax dollars. If those who get up and go to work at their jobs and pay taxes could only understand the way the rich play the game, they couldn't do. The problem is the harder you work in a job, the more you must pay the government taxes and are punishing the very people who voted them in. Attempts to finish the rich rarely work because the rich finds a way to minimize their tax burden. One such way to in section is section 1030 of the Internal Revenue Code, which allows a seller to delay paying taxes on a piece of real estate that is sold for a capital gain through an exchange for a more expensive piece of real estate. As long as you keep trading up in value, you don't be taxed on gains until you liquidate. Those who don't take advantage of these savings as missing a chance to build their asset column. In all the years Rich Dad was guiding Robert, he was trying to teach him that knowledge is power, and with money comes great power that requires the right knowledge to keep it and make it multiply. Without that knowledge, the world pushes you around. The taxman is a bully who will always take more if you let him. Don't let him by making your money work for you. Smart tax consultants and attorneys are worth their cost. As it's still cheaper than paying the government, it's expensive to not know the laws. In the mid 20 when we was he was just out of the Marine Corps and working for Xerox. Robert was disappointed by how much was taken out of his paychecks. It motivated him to form his first corporation in 1974 and work harder at his day job to amass as much money as possible to invest in real estate. He became one of the top salesmen at Xerox and in less than 3 years was making more in the real estate holding corporation that he was at Xerox. His company brought him his first Porsche, proof that the planning was plan was working. The lessons he learned from this stat helped him break out of the proverbial rat race at an early age, and he wants to help others do the same. Financial IQ or financial intelligence is what makes that possible. It's made of four things: accounting, financial literacy, the ability to read number and evaluate the strength and weakness of any business; investing, the science and strategy of money, making money; Understanding market, the science of supply and demand in the market condition and the law, tax advantages and protections. Understanding these those legal advantages is profound when it comes to long-term wealth. For instance, a corporation can pay expenses before paying taxes, whereas an employee gets taxed first and must try to pay expenses on what is left. Board meeting in Hawaii, car payment and insurance and health club membership can be pre-tax expenses for a corporation. Corporations also offer legal protection from lawsuits when someone sues a wealthy individual. They are often met with layers of legal protection and often find that the wealthy person actually owns nothing. They control everything, but own nothing. Robert urges those who own legitimate assets to find out more about corporation benefit and protections. Garrett Sutton's books are among many that can help. In summary, business owners with corporation earn, spend, pay taxes. Employees who work for corporation earn, pay taxes, spend. Left hemisphere movement. Accounting is financial literacy or the ability to read number. This is a vital skill if you want to build an empire. The more money you are responsible for, the more accuracy is required, or the house comes tumbling down. Right hemisphere movement, investing is the science of money, making money. This involves strategy and formulas which use the creative side of the brain. Subconscious movement, understanding market is the science of supply and demand. You need to know the technical aspects of the market, which is emotion driven in addition to the fundamental or economic aspects of an investment. What was Robert saying? Now it's time to reflect. Ask yourself, what is Robert saying in this quote and why does he say that? In this section, you do not need to agree or disagree with Robert. The goal is to understand what Robert is saying. Remember, this curriculum is designed to be cooperative and supportive. Two minds are better than one. If you do not understand what Robert is saying, do not shy away from it. Ask for help in understanding. Take the time, discuss each quote until you understand it. My rich dad just played the game smart and he did it through corporations. The biggest secret of the rich, the reality is that the rich are not taxed. It's the middle class who pays for the poor, especially the educated upper middle class, upper income middle class. Even every time people try to punish the rich don't simply comply. They react. They have the money, power, and initiate to change things. They don't just sit there and voluntarily pay more taxes. If you work for money, you give the power to your employer. If money works for you, you keep the power and control it. A person who understands the tax advantage and protections provided by a corporation can get rich so faster, much faster than someone who is an employer or a small business sole proprietor. It's like the difference between someone walking and someone flying. Employees earn and get taxed, and they try to live on what is left. A corporation earns, spends everything it can, and is taxed on anything that is left. It's one of the biggest legal tax loopholes that the rich use. Additional questions. Now it's time to take the stories in this chapter along with the understanding of what Robert was saying and apply them to you and your life. Ask yourself the questions below and discuss them with your study partner. Be honest with yourself and your partner. If you do not like some of the answers you are giving, ask yourself if you are willing to change and accept the challenge to change your thoughts and mindsets. Do you agree with the rich dad's assessment of Robin Hood that he was a crook? Why or why not? Have taxes created a bigger problem with government spendings? Do you think members of the middle class and the poor realize that the burden of taxes has fallen to them? What effects of that do you see? Do you believe fall more under the banner of capitalist or socialist? What are the benefits and downfalls of each way of thinking? Are the rich right to use the advantages of corporation to avoid paying taxes? Do you think more people could follow suit if they understood the system better? What are specific ways that you yourself could benefit from using a corporation from your assets? Term definitions 1030. Jargon for Section 1030 of Internal Revenue Code, which allows a seller to delay paying taxes on a piece of real estate that is sold for a capital gain through an exchange for a more expensive piece of real estate. Corporation, a legal document that creates a legal body without a soul. It's not a building, a factory, or a group of people using it. The wealth of the rich is protected. Financial IQ, financial intelligence that comes as a result of financial education. People with high financial IQ learn to use other people's money to become rich. Financial literacy, the ability to read and understand financial statement, which allows you to identify the strengths and the weakness of any business. Here, chapter 4 completed. In chapter 5, we will cover it in our next video. Thank you very much. Bye bye.